Hi folks, how's it going? First things first, you may have noticed that I'm not on Facebook at the moment. What's happening is it seems that someone or something at Facebook has decided to arbitrarily suspend personal accounts, business accounts, groups, all sorts of stuff is just appearing. You have one chance, it seems, to upload this odd little video of yourself, and then it seems even if you do that, your account is suspended and there's no further means of appeal. This is happening to a lot of people. I've seen a lot of groups online talking about this, trying to find ways around it. There doesn't appear to be at the moment. So basically my main account has been suspended. Everything that I've posted, all of my groups, any videos I've put up, all of that is all gone, and I have no access to any of it, my cutting edge Systema group or anything else, no access at all. Now, I am working to try and get around this in various ways. So if over the next couple of weeks you get a friend request from a small white spaniel, chances are it's me. So keep an eye out for that. And if anyone does have a work around this, if this has happened to you, then please do let me know. In the meantime, of course, you can drop me a comment here on the YouTube channel, or you can send me an email at systemauk@outlook.com. All right, on then to today's topic, which is spoiling the drill. Is this a good thing or is it a bad thing? Over the past, 3 months really, in our sessions here, we've been focusing on the principle of integration, full body integration in everything that we do. Of course, this is a fundamental in a lot of different martial arts. Everything pretty much from boxing onwards talks about working from the feet, bringing the power out. And to do that, you need to be able to integrate your whole movement. But it goes beyond movement, of course. It works into our breathing, into our psychological state and everything else. So that's been the main area we've been working on. And of course, if you want to get access to the downloads for that, just click the join button below for details. I mean, this really, in a sense, is how we structure most of our training in Systema anyway, generally above working from the technique perspective. Most of the time we're focusing on this idea of principle, and then the technique, or what you actually do, is born out of the principle. This is still in sharp contrast to some other places. And in fact, I watched something on YouTube just the other day where it was a YouTube person has said he's studied 40 or 45 different martial arts styles, and now he's going to get together and spar with his buddy, and he's going to use each of those styles and see which one is the best. And of course, what he does is he takes maybe one technique or movement from each of those styles. So when he comes to do Wing Chun, he does some of this. When it's karate, he does some of this. Jiu-Jitsu, he's doing some of this. Systema, he sort of went... I don't know what that was about. But the point is, each of these little techniques that he did, he practiced them, he did them in exactly the same way in terms of his body movement and what was happening biomechanically. So, yeah, interesting. The thing is, for me, our work should always be simple. Whatever we do, our movement should be very simple and quite basic. We're going to get enough complexity from the other person. The other person or people are going to provide all the complexity you could wish for. So our own movement needs to be very simple and direct in response to that. It's a bit of a Gordian knot idea, really. You know, you've got this incredible puzzle. Well, we'll just cut through that. There we go. It's done. That's pretty much our approach. But of course, there is simple and deep, and there is simplistic and shallow. And sad to say, it's the way of the world. Simplistic and shallow is always going to look better on social media. It's always going to sell better. It's more accessible. It gives people a quick, very visual, easily digestible thing to look at and go, oh yeah, or oh no. Of course, it's the underlying principles that make this thing work. Really, it's like focusing on the tip of the spear. If you watched Forging Fire or any of those shows, you know, a person could make a really great spear tip, but the rest of the weapon is fragile as anything. It's just no good. it can't deliver that spear tip. Without those principles and delivery system behind it, any technique is going to be useless. So one of the principles we've been practicing in this work is the idea of working into an attacker's tension. If someone loads up a punch and starts to throw it, if we can cut into their tension, usually in the chest here, then we can do a lot to either sort of prevent that movement, to cut into that movement, or it sort of takes the power out of it. Simple biomechanics, but of course you have to be very precise and the timing has to be spot on. So we're practicing this in a few different ways. One way is we were using the knife. Forget about knife defense. Often we use the knives as a tool for precision. They tend to bring a lot more focus into a drill than if you're just punching. Of course, this will feed into your knife work anyway. But the main thing we started was as the person comes forward and they're loading up, then you point the knife or prod the knife into that point of tension, and of course you get that stop. It tends to stop the movement. Great, that's all going fine. But then what started to happen, and this was quite natural, I hadn't planned this. Again, in Systema, there's a lot of improvisation goes on. It's jazz as compared to classical music, I guess you could say. So I think it was Jay is getting this here. Oh, but what if I relax off against that? Now I can go around it. So then we start getting into another drill where there's a response to the response. I made a point, though, that this, of course, spoils the drill for the person with the knife because they're going along quite happy. Jab, oh yeah, that works. Jab, oh maybe I just need to put that there. Oh yeah, that's better. And then suddenly this doesn't work anymore. Well, that's the limit of a technique, right? If we approach this in a technique way and we did that to someone who knew how to counter it, then, well, that technique is useless. Therefore, this whole art must be useless. Now we get a response to that response. That calls for another response from the person with the knife. So now we start getting into this flow. Of course, that's where it's going to lead us, less into a 1-2 drill and more into a flow. Of course, at this stage, it's still pretty light. We're just working into principles, but what we're doing is building up, if you like, that half of the spear in order to be able to deliver the spear point. We need then, of course, to put that into our sparring, into our testing, and so on. But you're going into sparring armed with the principle behind a movement rather than a technique of going, oh, it worked, it didn't work, on to the next technique. Does this mean then that every time we do a drill, we should be trying to spoil it? Well, the answer is it depends. As usual, everything is down to context. Anyone who's taught martial arts or practiced martial arts for a while has no doubt come across that one person who, if we say, right, today we're going to practice wrist locks, puts their hands in their pockets or tucks them under their arms. You're not going to do that to me. See, you can't do that to me. Now, of course, there are ways around that, usually a punch and then put the wrist lock on. But the point is that person is spoiling the drill by refusing to even engage with it. Normally a drill starts, whether you're working a technique or a principle, whatever it is, with you have to give the person something to work with. Step one. Step two, of course, if we're looking at working locks with the wrists or the arm. So yeah, first of all, we might start like this. Now we can start saying, as you apply that lock, I'm going to try and escape. As you apply that lock, I'm going to counter with another lock. I'm going to move around again. Then you work all the way up into your free flow, your sparring and your testing. So the point then becomes, the point of judgment, if you like, for the instructor is at what stage is it okay to spoil the drill. If you never spoil the drill, then you never really get beyond that 1-2. Defender, attacker. The bad guy attacks and I defend, which brings me on to my final point. A lot of martial arts, at least when I first started, when you started doing this work, drills, it was attacker, defender. Obviously in Japanese they have a specific term for that, uki, and I can't remember the other one, forgive me. So I'm very much the good guy as the defender, and here comes the attacker, and he's going to throw a punch, and I'm going to counter and do whatever back. Then that goes well, we reset, and we repeat that again. There's a lot of repetition of that kind of drill, at least in my experience in my particular school. There were some efforts to make that a little more freeform at some points, but they were fairly, well, either crude because we get together ourselves and basically just have a fight. That wasn't done in class. That sort of thing got to be frowned upon in class. Or you might work in another step or two, but it was all pretty much you attack, I defend kind of idea. Now, I suppose in a sense this might come out of what you call a cultural or moral code, in that people learn martial arts in order to be a good person, in order to defend their families and their friends and their communities. Great, that's all fine. But we have to be realistic about life as well. Sometimes good people are called upon to do bad things. Sometimes the person who you might think of as a bad person is not necessarily a bad person, but they are attacking you. We could think of mental health issues or substance abuse, that kind of thing. So I suppose what I'm saying is it's never this cut and dry attacker-defender. There can be a lot of grey. This is why, for example, we learn how to work with knives as well. For one thing, if you want to learn about a weapon, learn how to use it. It takes away a lot of the fear of being around the weapon. You get to learn how it's used, how it's deployed, and how you can then counter that. But the other side of it is certain people in certain occupations or certain situations might be in a position where they have to use that knife. You know, we can all come up with any number of horrible scenarios where we might have to take things further than we would like to. So in some circumstances, are you the attacker or are you the defender? If you have to go in and put a stop to a situation, you might have to initiate the violence or the hands-on or whatever you want to call it. Does that make you the attacker or the defender? So what we tend to do, we don't really put those roles into our training. We've just got one person coming into another, or three coming into one, or whatever it is, and we see how that person responds or reacts. You know, the response is generally better than a reaction. That's normally what we're working for. And this gives you then a lot of freedom, I find, to create drills, to put them in all sorts of different situations. Obviously, environmentally, we can work in different places, indoors, outdoors, inside cars, all that sort of stuff. And this is where then the real life feedback of our students comes in, because people come to sessions and they say, oh, this happened last week, they'll explain what happened. We can look at what they did, we can look at how things worked out, and we can build that then into our training. This keeps everything much more alive than having this conventional, oh, here's a bad guy who's going to rob me, he's going to hold the knife to my throat, I do this, I do this, I do this kind of thing, which I do see a lot of. And in fact, there's a lady quite prominent at the moment in the UK. She's been on breakfast television and all this stuff, teaching self-defense moves for women, which I have nothing against the concept, of course, I've done it myself, but doing it very much in this technique way. If a man grabs you here, you step back, you do this, you do this, you do this, and it's just not going to work because you're ignoring all that stuff behind that spear tip again. The delivery system, the psychological system, everything else is just not prepared for that level of violence. So that's pretty much it then. Is it okay to spoil the drill? Well, yes, if you're at the right point in the development. If the people have absorbed what they're supposed to have absorbed in the first part, then of course you can start developing. But this is also, of course, it allows the people training the students to start giving their own input in the drill. This is important as well. As Vladimir often said, if you copy my movement, you're doing my movement. You need to learn your movement. So get away from thinking this here, and start exploring more how your body moves, how it integrates, but also how you can separate parts of the body off to work stuff, and start building that into your drills. Start making them more flow based and interactive rather than A does A, B does B, reset and repeat that again. And of course, just another reminder that to get access to all of that stuff, I think we've got over 100 downloads on the YouTube channel now. The last, I think we're up to about 14 covering this work on body integration. It's a very simple sounding thing, but as we go into it, we're discovering a lot of depth. Very interesting work, very interesting. So just click the join button below for details of that. As always, if you haven't already, please do like, share and subscribe. Please do leave your comments below if they're sensible, because, you know, social media. And hopefully I will be back on Facebook soon. So do keep an eye out for any odd friend requests. Take care.